Okay, a few of you may have been anxiously waiting for me to upload this video of the worst films of 2017 so far for me, but I had to wait because I had to see two more stinkers that I missed out last year, and I finally went to see them, and one of them made it into the top 10 worst films of 2017 for me. But that'll be the second video, because most likely I'll be splitting this countdown in half. Just in case you haven't seen my two videos covering my top 20 films of 2017 yet, well, here's some disclaimers. For one, the year that a movie is released, I base it completely off of its wide release in the US, seeing that I'm a US resident. So if a movie had a limited release date in the US on the previous year or in another country any other year, but had a wide release in 2017, I consider it a 2017 movie, so those qualify for this list. Also bear in mind that I haven't seen every movie from 2017, so this list could change when I ultimately see all the movies I want to see and all the movies I don't want to see from 2017. I have seen a lot of stinkers. I've been rewatching movies and watching some movies I missed in January through March of 2017, and so a few of those got added to the list because of that. Also bear in mind, this is my opinion. Everyone has different opinions. Some people hate the movies I love. Some people love the movies I hate. It's all a difference of opinion. Now, bear in mind, I've seen a lot of horrible films. I go out of my way to see some truly awful, terrible films. So, if a big blockbuster film that you disliked isn't on this list, like Justice League or Star Wars: The Last Jedi, it's because I've seen a lot worse. By the way, Last Jedi, it's in my top 10 for best so far. Justice League I never reviewed. It's more of a 3-star movie though, so nothing that I consider terrible, nothing I consider really good either. So yeah, movies like that are not going to be on this list. But here's a few movies that didn't make the cut because I've seen far worse. Somehow, movies like Flatliners, Everything, 47 Meters Down, Fist Fight, The Shack, The Circle, Baywatch, Geostorm, The Mummy, Monster Trucks, Rock Dog, A Bad Mom's Christmas, and Chips didn't even make my top 20 countdown of the worst films of 2017. So congratulations, movies. You're not as bad as the movies I've seen. There are at least 20 movies worse than you. Congratulations. But anyway, let's actually get this list started. My number 20 is an animated film, and it's not the only animated film in this list. Like I said in my best of when I talked about Coco, it's been a very bland year for animated films, and so my number 20, Despicable Me 3. Now, I really enjoyed the first one when it came out. I enjoyed it, I own it. Second movie, I was disappointed. Minions was okay until it got to the last act where it just got boring and it felt like it ran out its own gag. The third one though, third Despicable Me, I found almost nothing good about this. All the things that could have been good were very surface level, very bland, very lazy. The brother was annoying. There's a lot of moments that actually had the possibility of having something good happen, only to not use everything to its advantage and actually just go the lazy route and just not be good. It's one of those movies where I don't have a lot to say about it, but I just can't find myself liking it, and it managed to make the bottom 20. My number 19 is a horror movie. It's a sequel. And it's a sequel that just puts an S at the end. It is Rings. Now, when I first saw this movie, I gave it 2 stars. I thought, okay, it's kind of forgettable. It's not scary. It still tries to do what The Ring did by having it a mystery, but it's one of those movies where you know exactly what's coming. The twist is spoiled in the trailer, and it makes it out like it's some big reveal when it's really not that big of a reveal because you see it in the trailer. But Rings, when I first saw it, I thought, okay, it's a passable 2-star meh horror movie. I still kind of feel that way, but after rewatching some movies from February, I realized it is a lot worse than I thought it was. And there is some potential in some of the storylines, but bad acting, not scary, Samara breaking her own rules several times throughout the movie, and just feeling like a retread of the first movie just makes it a very bland, terrible horror movie. My number 18, Transformers: The Last Knight. And it's probably going to go further down the list when I eventually rewatch it, when I look at movies from the summer. I can't remember when it came out. It was probably May. Was it May or June? It was definitely in the summer, I remember. And this movie almost gave me a headache watching it. First of all, the story is convoluted, it's stupid, it's ridiculous. Every Transformer since the first one has sort of made up its own backstory and reinvented the entire backstory of all the other ones. It has the same story, the same plot as all the other ones, and acting is just sort of bland. The only redeemable things I can say about the movie is Anthony Hopkins is fun and entertaining watching, especially when he's playing a senile old man. And there was some humor involved that I did find kind of charming and funny, which makes me sound insane because of how terrible this movie usually is. I don't feel it's as bad as Age of Extinction, but it's still bad. And the worst thing about this movie is the editing and the different ratio aspects that constantly change within scenes. That was the headache-inducing thing for me. If it wasn't for that, it probably wouldn't even have made the top 20 worst films, which is pretty crazy and telling of how many terrible movies I've seen for 2017. Alright, my number 17 I recently rewatched because my sister was getting into the bad horror movies from 2017, so I got her to watch this. I rewatched it. Rewatching this, I had the time of my life, and it's the only reason why it's higher on the list. My 17 is Wish Upon. Terrible horror movie. Funny, unintentionally hilarious movie. Almost everything about this movie is bad, and it doesn't feel like a horror movie at all because they try to mix horror with teenage comedy, and the teenage comedy sort of overwrites the horror, and it tries to be also Final Destination, but the kills are so lazy and useless, and there's just something absolutely hilarious, unintentionally hilarious about this movie. That's why it's not down in the top 10 worst films. If I went off of horror alone, yeah, this is one of the worst horror movies out there. Because it's just not scary. It's funny. Alright, number 16 is another movie I recently watched because it was a February release. It came out the same week as Rings. And this is worse than Rings. And rewatching it, it bumped down even further in my countdown. My number 16 is The Space Between Us. Oh my god, I forgot just how sappy and cheesy and stupid this film really is. In my original review of this, I said Asa Butterfield and whoever the two characters, the two main actors, I thought in my review was pretty good. They had chemistry, but the characters themselves have no chemistry. Rewatching it, not even the actors have chemistry. It's just plain bad and insufferable. And this is supposed to be a romance. If you can't care about the romance in this film, then what's the point? It is so cheesy. It goes into territory that is just dumbfounding and just gross. Despite it supposedly being a heartfelt, sci-fi, romantic movie. It's terrible. And then I saw all the twists coming. It's one of those movies where, similar to Collateral Beauty, it's clear that, well, by the way, same writer, it feels like it's the writer self-indulging himself and making all these twists and thinking he's very clever, when in actuality you see the twists and the things coming a mile away, and a lot of things are really cliched, and it's just dumb, ridiculous, and one of these days I'll have to do a long review of this movie because I don't know if I can survive watching it again. My number 15, another horror movie. Another movie that has unintentional hilarity to it. It was my last review that I've done. It is Friend Request. There's a few good things going for it. There's a few concepts and a few visuals that alone could be creepy, but there's moments that are unintentionally hilarious, and I can't imagine the writers thinking that it's supposed to be scary, because there are some lines of dialogue that's clearly meant to be funny, but it's just falls flat and doesn't fit the tone the movie is trying to go for. It's a Rings ripoff. Yeah, Rings ripoff, not The Ring. I'm going to call it a Rings ripoff, because that's even worse, mixed with Unfriended. That's what it is. Cinematography is good, and the animation in the movie is good. That's it. Alright, for my number 14, I can't believe I saw this in theaters, but it did come to theaters. It is Unforgettable. I barely remember this movie. I remember it being a thriller. I remember it having actual drama that could have been good if worked and developed, but instead the movie decided to focus on the bad character framing the good character, and so it cuts away from any of the possible drama that could have been in the film, instead showing us the bland and mundane tasks it takes to frame a person. The last act of the film was absolutely hilarious, but the last 30 minutes isn't worth sitting through the first hour and 15 or however long it took to get there. And I will say, despite the terrible material, the two actresses involved did a good job. They weren't sleepwalking through the film. That's surprising. Alright, my number 13 is an animated film. It is considered to many people the worst film made in 2017. It's my 13 worst film of 2017. It is the Emoji Movie. Yeah, this movie didn't even make my top 10 worst films of 2017. It's not even the worst animated film I've seen from 2017. In fact, for the most part of this, for the entirety almost of this film, I was completely indifferent. This was more of a meh kids film. I'm not trying to be cute with that. It is a meh children's film. And I was just indifferent through the whole thing, and I couldn't even find enough emotion to hate the film. And so that's why it's my number 13 rather than in my top 10. Because my top 10 I saved for movies that I either completely hated or failed so miserably at being good that it's unintentionally hilarious. Emoji Movie, you're not the worst thing I've seen in 2017. My number 12 is another horror film. God, horror films were amazing in 2017, but just as many great ones we had in 2017, we had terrible, crappy ones as well. And 12 was XX. It's an anthology piece, so granted, in anthology pieces, some movies could be good, some movies could be bad. And so to try to be more objective, I honestly critiqued all 4 of them separately and then developed an average score. And the last 2 films of the anthology, and it's a 4-movie anthology, the last 2 are acceptable. The third one is bland, mediocre, but okay for an anthology piece. The fourth one, the last video, was surprisingly good and could have been made into a feature-length film and could have been more of a dark comedy mixed with horror and could have worked. It's the first 2 movies in this anthology alone that bring it down to one of the worst films I saw from 2017 because they are laughable, they are hilarious, they are terrible in every single way. If those 2 weren't in it, I probably wouldn't even be talking about XX in my worst of list. Man, I was really sure that this movie would make it into my top 10 worst films of 2017. But surprisingly, I watched a film pretty recently because I missed out on a few films in December. Finally watched a movie, turned out to make it into my top 10 worst films of 2017. Just saw it a couple days ago. And so because of that, Resident Evil, the final chapter, is my number 11. God, this was horrible. I think it's really the only Resident Evil film that I absolutely hate. There's a few of them that I feel are just sort of or I don't care about, but this is the only one that I truly despise. And it's because of the blandness, the stupidity, the missed opportunity with the ending of the last one, the lame death of Wesker in this film, the lame side characters that have nothing to them, and the terrible action editing that is just so frantic and just so headache-inducing that it was almost the worst experience I had in the theater. I think I actually almost fell asleep in the movie if it wasn't for the jump scare that woke me up. Can't believe it didn't make my top 10 worst films of 2017.